Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to America's Geopolitics, where we provide you with hard-hitting geopolitical analysis from an American perspective. Let's get started. Donald Trump isn't asking for permission. He's not waiting for allies to approve or enemies to adjust. His trade policies are built on one simple principle: America first. Tariffs, they aren't a negotiation tool, they're a correction. A long overdue response to decades of bad deals, industrial decline, and foreign nations taking advantage of America's market. And the global reaction? Trump doesn't care. Because here's the truth. The U.S. never needed the global trade order as much as the rest of the world needed America. They say tariffs will wreck the economy, that the U.S. can't afford to go it alone, that America needs Canada, Mexico, China, and Europe just as much as they need America. They're wrong, and today we're going to break down why. Trump's trade war, who's actually losing? Now that Trump has slapped tariffs on China, Europe, Mexico, and even Canada, critics have lost their mind. They predicted an economic collapse, a trade war that America couldn't win, but fast forward, who's actually suffering? China's economy is in free fall, Europe scrambling to stay competitive, Mexico and Canada, they've built their supply lines around the U.S. So of course they're desperate to keep U.S. trade flowing, and the U.S. still standing. Here's the thing, Trump's tariffs aren't about winning a trade war. They're about breaking a system that was rigged against America. Of course, we built that system, but at this point, that system is no longer working for us. After World War II, the U.S. made a deal with the world. America would provide security, stability, and open markets in exchange for military cooperation. That system worked, the Soviets no longer exist, and now the system is defunct. By the time Trump took office, the U.S. was running massive trade deficits, while other countries, even so-called allies, were gaming the system. China manipulated its own currency, dumped cheap goods into U.S. markets. Europe set up trade barriers while enjoying free access to American consumers. And Canada and Mexico, they built their entire industries on American demand. Now that Trump has called their bluff, they're scrambling. He didn't ask if the global economy was ready. He's forcing it to change. China, the biggest loser in America's trade shift. If there's one country that had the most to lose from Trump's tariffs, it's China. For decades, China built its economic rise on access to U.S. market, cheap labor, stolen technology, and currency manipulation. These things helped China flood the world with low-cost goods, while America footed the bill. Today, Trump has said enough. These tariffs will hit hard. Hundreds of billions of dollars in Chinese exports suddenly are becoming more expensive. The result? Foreign companies are leaving China faster than ever. Chinese factories are slowing down production. Mass unemployment has become a thing in Beijing. The Chinese Communist Party is panicking. Beijing is trying to retaliate with tariffs of its own, but here's the problem. China sells far more to America than America sells to China. U.S. exports to China, around $150 billion. Chinese exports to the U.S., over $500 billion. Who do you think hurts more in a trade war? And it gets worse. The real estate crisis in China, where ghost cities and bad loans are stacking up, has made economic conditions even more fragile. With factories slowing down and foreign companies leaving, China's entire economic model is now under threat. I believe this morning a news report came out that China's foreign direct investment is down 99%. Meanwhile, the U.S. economy has remained strong and stable post-COVID-19. The biggest lie globalists told us, that America needs China. Here's the reality. China needs America far more than America needs China. The U.S. has plenty of alternate manufacturing options. Mexico, India, Vietnam. China, it can't replace the American consumer market. Without access to U.S. dollars, China's financial system weakens. China bet its future on America staying dependent, but Trump has came and changed the game. Why America doesn't need Canada and Mexico as much as they need the U.S. Let's clear up a major misconception. America does not depend on Canada and Mexico the way that they depend on America. Yes, they're trade partners, but let's break down who actually needs who. First, Canada. Canada sends 75% of its exports to the U.S. America, only about 18% of its exports go to Canada. If trade shut down tomorrow, Canada's economy would collapse overnight. Their biggest industries, oil, timber, auto parts, they all rely on the U.S. And without American refineries, Canada's oil is essentially worthless. Meanwhile, the U.S. has massive energy production of its own and can source key resources from multiple suppliers. Second, Mexico. Mexico is even more dependent. 80% of Mexico's exports go to the U.S. If America cut off trade, factories across Mexico would shut down overnight. Mexico thrives as a low-cost manufacturing hub only because it has easy access to the U.S. market. If that access disappears, Mexico has nowhere else to go. Meanwhile, the U.S. doesn't need Mexico for manufacturing. Trump's tariffs are already pushing companies to bring factories back home. Bottom line, if Canada and Mexico want to keep trading, they have to play by U.S. rules. Europe, the old order, can't keep up. If China is the biggest loser in Trump's trade war, Europe's not far behind. For decades, Europe played the game exactly right, for itself. High tariffs on U.S. goods, strict regulations that kept American companies out, heavy reliance on American security to keep trade routes safe. In other words, Europe got a free ride. The European Union loves to talk about free trade, but when you dig into the details, it's anything but. The EU has massive trade barriers against U.S. agricultural, tech, and energy while happily exporting its cars, luxury goods, and industrial products to American consumers. And then Trump happened. Trump started slapping tariffs on Europe, Brussels panicked. The EU isn't used to a U.S. president demanding fairness. They thought America would keep the status quo, where they get access to U.S. markets while keeping American goods out. Wrong. Trump has now called them out. 25% tariffs on European steel and aluminum, tariffs on European cars, hitting Germany right in its economic core, pushing for higher NATO spending, forcing Europe to pay for its own defense, and the biggest blow, the U.S. shift away from European energy. For years, Europe relied on Russian gas and Middle Eastern oil, while expecting America to secure global trade routes. But under Trump, America has become the world's largest oil and gas producer. Suddenly, Europe wasn't just losing its unfair trade advantage, it was losing access to cheap energy. And when Russia invaded Ukraine, Europe got a rude awakening. Their entire economic model depended on U.S. security and global stability that no longer existed. Europe needs America more than America needs Europe. Here's the reality. The EU sends over $400 billion in exports to the U.S. every year. The U.S. only exports back about $250 billion. If Europe loses access to the American market, their economy shrinks overnight. And defense, Europe has no backup plan. Germany's military is underfunded. France can't secure the continent alone. The UK is struggling to maintain its global influence without U.S. military power. Europe's entire security structure is falling apart. So now that Trump has told Europe to stop relying on the U.S. for free trade and free security, he's exposing a truth the EU doesn't want to admit. The old rules-based order is gone. America is moving on. The question is, can Europe survive without America's safety net? I'm sure they can, but it'll take a few decades for them to rebuild what they need to. And while they're rebuilding military, we will be rebuilding our factories and bringing manufacturing home. So what happens next? Does Europe adapt or does it fall behind? The new trade order, the world adapts or it gets left behind. Trump isn't just playing hardball. He's forcing a permanent shift in how the world trades. More production at home, less reliance on fragile global supply chains, stronger leverage in every trade negotiation. America is no longer playing the role of global economic babysitter. If countries want access to the U.S. market, they'll have to earn it. The media keeps asking, will Trump's tariffs work? They're missing the point. The real question is, why did it take this long? This probably should have been started under Obama. What do you think? Is Trump fixing America's trade system, or is he taking too big a risk? Let's talk about it in the comments. Don't forget, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more hard-hitting geopolitical analysis. This is Frank. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.